Just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward, always getting closer, I'm marching till it's over. I'm just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward, always getting closer, I'm marching till it's over. I'm just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward, always getting closer, marching till it's over.
The US Navy is the most powerful tool for global stability that most of us take for granted, and I'm about to explain why. Technically, the United States Navy that we all know and love today is the second United States Navy. The first one we had was the Continental Navy. During the course of the Revolutionary War, it was comprised of about 65 ships all throughout. Eight new frigates were commissioned and built for the Navy. Several ships were loaned, chartered, or captured. What made this Navy so different is it was not made to go up against the British Navy, at the time the most powerful Navy in the world. It was made to attack their weaker ships when they were weakest, capture them because, they don't deserve to have anything nice, or go and raid their commerce. In 1783, Continental Congress disbanded the Continental Navy. This left us without a navy for several years until the Algerian pirates took 13 American merchant ships. The Barbary pirates, as they were known at the time, consisted of Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Morocco. Only three of those would ever really mess with United States shipping. Uh, Morocco, it turns out, in fact, happens to be our oldest treated ally, thanks to Thomas Jefferson going over there and basically saying, leave our stuff alone. Let's be friends. We just beat the British. Fat Electrician, once again, did a great video on that. And he also did a great video on the start of the United States Navy, which we're just going to cover here in just a few, short minutes. So once the pirates took those ships, George Washington was pretty pissed off. The man said, okay, no, we need trade. We are a brand new country. He didn't request, he told Congress, you're going to make me a navy. So Congress got together, and this is at a time when, Congress could actually work. House of Representatives and the Senate got together and made the Naval Act of 1794. And it reads as such. Whereas the depredations committed by Algerine corsairs on the commerce of the United States render it necessary that a naval force should be provided for its protection. Section 1. Be it therefore enacted that the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that the President of the United States be authorized to provide by purchase or otherwise equip and employ 4 ships carrying 44 guns each and 2 ships carrying 36 guns each. Okay, during the Age of Sail, this was a huge deal. A 44-gun ship, a frigate, was a force to be reckoned with. This was something that would pull up in your harbor, and you hoped that they were there with good intentions. Just one of these was able to decimate a harbor or a small port community. When it was brought into being in 1794, it then went on to run 54 years of kicking ass and taking names. It started with the first Barbary War, fighting Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli. Then the Quasi War with France, which was once again about shipping. Then the second Barbary War with Tunis, Tripoli, and Algiers. The War of 1812, the Mexican American War, anti piracy operations in the Caribbean, and the American Civil War. One thing I didn't really include in the slides because it is a rabbit hole. However, toward the end of the Civil War, 2 ironclads were made, one by the North, one by the South. This revolutionized the thought of naval and maritime warfare as a whole. Once the Civil War ended, and I think it was in response to South American countries getting more modernized warships, as well as the dreadnought the HMS Dreadnought coming out of England, United States Congress decided to bring forward the Naval Act of 1890. This brought the United States out of the age of sail and into the age of steel. Um, the entire concept of these ships, battleships, pictured here is the USS Texas on your upper right hand side, was thick armor and as many large guns as you can bring. Uh, about this time, they were also using a type of gun called a casemate, a smaller gun. While I believe those were 12-inch guns on the deck of the Texas there, they'd bring some smaller, like 5-inch or 4-inch guns and just slap them all aboard the ship. Thankfully, it was found out, I do believe it is during the Russo-Japanese War, uh, early 1900s, that casemate guns were actually just absolutely worthless, and it was started to be done away with. Uh, a study done by a British observer aboard a Japanese ship said, yeah, these things are doing nothing. So everyone just started getting rid of those. So the Naval Act of 1890 brought the U.S. from the 12th strongest navy in the world to the 5th. It also played a very important part of the Spanish American War of 1898. This brought the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and several other uh, islands under United States territorial ownership. All of them, except I believe Guam at that point or today, have since become their own countries. Well, Puerto Rico is still kind of happily one of our territories. I don't know. Uh, that's a different story altogether. That's a different show altogether. But so this is the delineation line between Old Navy, wooden sail, New Navy, steel and gun. Okay, that's all we need to know right here. So World War One, World War Two. Ah, God, it's hard to explain this one. Okay, so going into the really turbulent time prior to World War One, everyone wanted battleships, wanted dreadnoughts, wanted these massive ships with massive guns. The United States had several. There was a congressional plan with funding set aside for 50 different battleships. Each battleship would be named after a state. Think USS Arizona, USS Michigan, USS Florida, USS Texas. All of these ships were to be the backbone of the American fleet. Going into World War One, there was a lot of hit and run warfare, especially against commerce. The Germans using their U-boats. That's what sank the USS Lusitania, or well, maybe not USS, but the Lusitania, which several Americans died on. It was just a cruise ship. It was mistaken for a cargo ship. That's what brought the U.S. into World War One. After World War One, after the Great Depression, during the Great Depression, that time frame, the United States decided, okay, battleships are cool, but we just learned this really big lesson during World War One, or as they called it, the Great War. They thought another one would never kick off again. Go figure, right? That air power was an immense boon when it came to warfare. If you can control the skies, you can control the ground. The United States decided, well, if it's such a big thing in land warfare, then quite possibly, more than likely, oh my God, let's do it at sea. And we developed several aircraft carriers going into World War II, prior to World War II. Several other countries did as well. One of Japan's main targets for the Pearl Harbor attack was to take out and cripple the American Pacific Fleet, concentrating on carriers and battleships. They really wanted the carriers. What do you know? None of them were there, which really turned out to bite them in the ass. Coming out into World War II, by the end of it, we ran 102 carriers across 3 different classes. You had the fleet class, the escort class, and the merchant class. Merchant class was very much smaller, only a few airplanes on it, mainly for spotting submarines because the Imperial Japanese Navy was using subs to hunt American commerce. Same thing about the Germans and their U-boats. It was more so they could call in the bigger boys to go take care of problems. The larger ships, such as the Hornet, the Enterprise, these ships were the fleet class. These were the largest, and they were carrying aboard, about 100-ish aircraft. If you take a look at the ship on your right there, I do believe that is a picture of the Enterprise just post World War II. And I'm sorry for the horrible pixel quality. If I had more pixels, I'd give them to you. But it is most of the aircraft on the nose of the aircraft carrier, and their wings are bent up. If you take a look at naval aviation in the United States, we like smaller aircraft or aircraft that can either bend their wings or flex their wings one way or another so we can get more birds on the boat. That is the big thing. And it turned out that the clash of philosophies of big gun, big steel versus bigger steel and weaponized swarm tactics were to come head to head in World War II. And by the end of it, the United States proved that the aircraft carrier was the superior philosophy. Um, by the end of it, the Imperial Japanese Navy and its, I do believe they had an Air Force. They might have just been attached to their army like we used to do. Um, they were so desperate to get rid of American ships because we dominated the air that they started kamikazing. One thing, though, at the beginning of the war, the Japanese Zero was far superior to any American aircraft at the time. At the time, going in, starting production in 1940, we were running the F4, F3 Wildcat. This thing only had four to six machine guns. It depended on the variant. Early ones had four, later ones had six, but it is underpowered, slow, couldn't climb as fast. It just, for a plane of its time, going from biplanes to monoplanes such as this, with closed cabins instead of people dropping hand grenades out of an airplane, it was a decent idea. But when it came to practice against something like Japan's Zeros or their bombers, it just wasn't getting the job done. Thankfully for the United States and our almost unprecedented industrial capacity as well as our logistical capacity, we very quickly came up with two solutions to that problem. The first one being the F4U Corsair. Uh, I don't. I don't know what they were thinking other than no one in that design room was sober, and I'm here for it. Okay. You can see the bend in its wings, which gave it a nice, distinct whistling sound as it was flying. The Japanese used to call it the whistling death. This thing said, no machine guns. I don't, machine guns bad. Machine guns too little. We're going to take 420 millimeter cannons. And you have to understand, these are old school prop driven planes. They are not armored, right? You probably have more armor in your car than these things do. And they said, we're not taking machine guns, we're taking cannons. One hit from 120 millimeter cannon would rip a plane apart. And these guys were firing four at a time. It also had a variant that came with 8 rockets. Why? Because ships don't like rockets. And then taking the base Wildcat, okay, we can upgrade this a bit, give it a better engine, give it a little bit more carrying capacity, play with the aeronautics a little bit. We can make it better. So we started retooling everything that made the F4F Wildcat, and we started pumping out the F6, F5 Hellcats. These things ran 4 to 6, depending on variant machine guns of the 50 caliber range. 2 20 millimeter cannons, 6 rockets. It could also carry a payload of bombs. Why? Because ships don't like bombs. They could also carry torpedoes. Why? Because ships don't like torpedoes. Everything about these aircraft was designed to tell the Japanese, go home. Go home, the war is done. It took us, introducing them to a sunrise twice for them to finally get the message. But when it came to air power in the Pacific, the United States was damn near unmatched by 1944. And all this brings us up to a very important question. Why the hell is the US Navy so important today? Why, what really justifies the expenditure that we put into the Navy? Aircraft carriers being several billion to build, maintain. Uh, we got cruisers and destroyers, a dozen plus submarines. We're coming back with a frigate fleet and some corvettes. Why do we need a Navy so large today? And this is where I'm going to step off for a second and say, because when I'm asked several times, throughout a year, if you could do it all over again, would you, about the Army? And my honest answer is, if I wasn't so afraid of water, I would have gone into the Navy. When young men and women come up and talk to me about military service, the first thing I try to do is discourage them from it, because it's a different military today, and too many kids these days just don't have the drive for military, or they can't take the verbal abuse that it takes to turn you into a soldier, sailor, marine, airman. But if you have to, or if your kid is dead set on military, I tell them go into the Navy. Why? Because there's only so much space aboard a boat. You can't have 100 dudes running around doing the same thing like you can in the Army. In the Army, I've got infinite space, right? I've got boots on the ground, nice, dry ground, keep it dry. In the Navy, you've got only so much space. I mean, people are literally sharing racks to sleep on. They call it hot cotting. When you climb out to go do your job, someone else climbs in. That is how pressed for space the Navy is. It's worse aboard submarines. Submarines, hell, they have to recycle water, right? Um, and so you only get like a maybe 2 minute, 3 minute shower at max. But you have to be a damn near master of your craft. You can't have like one person to point where a screw goes, another person to put the screw there, a third person to put the screwdriver to it, a fourth person to turn the screwdriver, and a fifth person to tell them which way it goes. You have to have one person for all of that in the Navy. So whether it be a nuclear engineer or aircraft mechanic, whether it just be some dude working on electronics, being an electrician in the Navy, they have to be the best that there is at it. So let's give our sailors a round of applause there. Let's give them their kudos, because whatever the hell they did, they are some of the best in the world at doing it, thanks to the lack of space they had and the hardships they went through. But let's get back on topic. What makes the US Navy so damned important today? And that would be national defense. If you take a look at the United States, we got like the easiest spawn in the world. We got a friendly northern neighbor, which has like what, maybe 20 million people or so. I mean, hell, but let's just get on Google real quick. What is the population of Canada? 40,528,396. All right, and they're nice when you're not at war with them. War crimes a clock. Just look at World War One. But we're not at war with them. And then we got Mexico to our south, which, while contentious depending on who's in office, we still have a pretty decent relationship with. On either side, there's water. Okay. To get to us for a fight, without going through our two friends there, you have to come to us through water. So you have to have a strong Navy to protect us. Second is protection of global commerce. You like getting your Temu packages for fucking cheap. You like getting your Amazon packages for cheap. Thank the Navy, because 90% of that comes from overseas. And without someone guarding those container ships going through, say, the Strait of Hormuz or the Somali coast, or back in the day through the Caribbean islands when there are pirates all over there, or going through the South China Sea now, where Chinese ships are trying to bully anything and everything away from the waters, you have the U.S. Navy there now. And that is one of their main goals. I hate that we are world police, but this is one thing I'm thankful for, because I don't think anyone else would ever step up for it. And one of the greatest quotes of all time about the Navy actually comes from Theodore Roosevelt, an Army guy like me, cavalry, but back when cavalry was cool. And he had the good sense to know that the Navy was important. The quote stating, "A good Navy is not a provocation for war, it is the surest guarantee of peace." And now I get to talk about the gear. Mind you, I can't go into every little detail. I'm not a sailor. I'm not fully hands-on with this. I actually know more about the Air Force than the Navy. I know more about the Marines than the Navy. And granted, I thought I knew quite a bit about the Navy until I started research for this video. Oh my God. Sailors, you've got my heartfelt, deepest sympathies because of how much stuff you have to know. I didn't know jack about a phased radar Yeah, it goes above my head. This is why I was a trigger puller, not a seaman. Okay, I'm not going to go too much into the submarine fleet. One thing that you do need to know, though, if you're talking about U.S. and submarines can work alone, lone wolf, or wolf packs as a group, or they can work as a greater part of a fleet, whether it be the overall fleet or one of the numbered fleets. The numbered fleets, as we saw in the last slide, uh, each are responsible for one area of the globe. U.S. submarines are just kind of a jack of all trades. They can take out surface targets. They can take out, by surface targets, I mean surface ships. They can take out other submarines, and they can erase cities off the map. They can change the topography. They can make the people who run Google Earth hate them, and that's the any of them really. So we've got 25 Virginia class submarines. These are attack submarines. They go after surface ships, other subs. Los Angeles class, which is being phased out for more Virginias, 24 of those, and they, same thing, attack subs. 3 Seawolf class, Y3. Well, we had orders for more to compete with the Soviets sub fleet, and then the Soviets decided not to exist anymore because their economic system sucked. So we didn't need anything as powerful as the Seawolf anymore. We scaled it down. We kind of brought it back, brought you know made it cheaper, more economic, and that's where we got the Los Angeles clubs or class submarines from. And then we've got 14 Ohio class ballistic missile submarines. One thing that you have to know about all these subs is they are ballistic missile capable. Uh, so every one of them, in one way or another, can launch something like a Tomahawk or other cruise missile, ballistic missile to go and take out a land target if you need. That's all I need to know about these as a ground pounder. Somewhere in the world, there are over 50 of these things that can rain hell and destruction upon people trying to harm me, which is nice. No one knows where they're at. That is the point of a submarine. It's supposed to be stealthy. U.S. submarines not only run a quieter uh, diesel electric engine, some of them nuclear, but they also run a specialized rubber on the hull, and it's dimpled. Like I said, not a sub guy. I don't design these things. I've never been on one. I hope I've never been near one. I don't know. Dad was in the Navy. He took me to the San Diego, San Francisco, whatever, naval base a few times. I got to look at a frigate. That was cool. Subs scared the hell out of me. I mean, why would you want to go on the water and then go under it? No, thank you. The Ohio class ballistic missile submarines are the ones that carry nukes. They are part of the American nuclear triad. Two parts consist of the United States Air Force. One of them, one branch of that Air Force, controls the ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, that can reach from the United States all the way over to wherever, literally. Then it also has aircraft such as the B-52, B-2, the B-1, or the Bone, that can launch either nuclear launched, or sorry, aerial launched nuclear cruise missiles, or they can drop nuclear dumb bombs or nuclear guided bombs. So think Hiroshima and Nagasaki just dropping. The third leg is our second response. That would be our Ohio class ballistic missile submarines. In the event that we are hit by nukes, these things are our retaliation. If the other two are not able to get off their munitions, guaranteed these Ohio class ballistic missile submarines can. So that's the subfleet. I'm done with that because, God, there's so much that goes into these and it just ain't me. But now, since I had a Russian pop up in one of the shorts that I made from the last video trying to talk some trash, we're going to do a like for like comparison of our fleet versus the Russian fleet. And the first off is the backbone of our fleet. And by backbone, I just mean these things hold everything together. This is the Arleigh Burke class destroyer. I'm not going to go into speed, turn radius. I'm not going to do none of that. I think Habitual Line Crosser said it the best. You guys don't care. You want to know about the weapons. Why? Because it's the flashy part. Um, so let me see. This thing can run 56 Tomahawk cruise missiles, uh, more than likely the Block 5B. Each one of these has a 1,035-mile radius, and they are stored in 90 vertical launch silos. It also has Mark 46 torpedo launchers, one 5-inch gun, which equals out to 127 millimeters. This thing can put out 16 to 20 rounds a minute and can nail things out to 13 miles, which I'm pretty sure the Marines are very thankful for. One of these things can just sit off the shore and pound any defenses into rubble, and then they can go onto the beach without as much gunfire. It also has one or two Sea Whiz on it, which is a close-in weapon system. This is a Gatling cannon attached to a radar dome. Not even kidding. It's meant to take down incoming cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, aircraft, drones, small boats, fish you don't like, birds you don't like. Literally, if it's within range, that thing can track it and kill it. The Sea Whiz is not something to laugh at. When you're talking about 4,500 rounds a minute that's firing armor piercing tungsten or depleted uranium rounds, it's going to shred. The Army has something similar to this. We call it the CRAM. It's literally the same weapon system, but us being the Army, we just decided to throw it on a flatbed truck and park it. I've seen videos of these things shooting down mortars coming in. Um, I don't think I was ever on a base that had one of these for very long. I was in Bagram a few times, in Jalalabad a few times, always traveling through. And we got mortared there, but I don't know if they had these things on. One thing you have to know about missile defense is missile or mortar or any of that defense is the the defensive weapon system. So in this case, the CWIS works best when it is at the center of the target. It's just easier to predict what the thing's going to do if it's trying to hit where you're at. You don't have to try to strafe across the sky and hit it. You just Bert. Okay, but this thing, it's been used to great effect. Small boats, especially after the USS Cole incident, these things just a couple rounds across a bridge, across a bow, people usually turn away. If they don't, then their boat becomes splinters. It doesn't matter what it's made out of, wood, metal, and just splinters in the sea. And then it has one Bushmaster 25 millimeter chain gun, the same that is on the Bradley that we looked at last week that, dismantled a Russian tank. Compare that to the, God, I hate Russian, Admiral Gorshkov class frigate. It has one 130 millimeter gun because they have to try to one up us every time. I mean, what is the difference between 130 millimeters versus 122 millimeters? Hell if I know. It has 16 vertical launch silos capable of launching the Caliber cruise missile that can hit out to about 870 miles, according to what our U.S. Department of Defense has been able to suss out, as well as other open source information outlets. While the Kremlin claims it can hit out over 1,500 miles, which, look, anything the Kremlin says, I don't take with a pinch of salt. I take with the whole damn shaker. It has 32 surface to air missile VLS cells to take out drones, drones, aircraft, mortars, missiles, things like that. Two Palash CWIS, which is very similar to our CWIS. 8 torpedo tubes and two 14.5 millimeter machine guns. And the reason I laugh when I think of the Palash or the 32 surface to air VLS cells is well, ask the Black Sea Fleet what's left of it anyway, how well those have been working. Because I'm pretty sure a country without a navy has been picking them apart piece by piece. But hey, that's just me. Now we come up to the U.S. Ticonderoga class guided missile cruiser. This thing runs 8 Mark 26 multi-mission missile launchers. These things can be loaded with a missile for every occasion. It's kind of like women and their nail polish. You got one missile for anti-air. You got, well, one missile for close anti-air, one missile for far anti-air. You've got one missile for making boats disappear. You got one missile for making subs disappear. You got one missile for making military bases disappear. I mean, by God, they're everywhere. Which, when you think about it, if you're a submarine, a missile going up is like whatever, and then it dives down, finds you, and breaks you in half. That's pretty damn terrifying. We don't even use depth charges as far as I know anymore. We just have missile launchers for it. Uh, the way we went in World War II with airplanes is the way we are going now with missiles, which to me is actually kind of cool. The only problem is how expensive they are. But hey, someone's talking about bringing back the battleship chassis and just loading them with missiles. So we'll see what a coastline looks like after the next time someone upsets us. This thing runs two 5-inch guns, each with that 13-mile range, being able to put out, like 16 rounds a minute. Two Phalanx Sea Whiz, two triple torpedo launchers. In other words, one launcher on either side of the ship. So cha and cha. And each one of those can drop 3 torpedoes at a time for anti-ship operations or anti-sub operations. Another 122 VLS cells, each one of these being multi-mission capable, slightly larger, I believe, that can launch like the Tomahawk cruise missile, go out and touch someone. Then we've got two 25 millimeter Bushmaster chain guns, once again, the same type that are on the Bradleys that destroyed the T-90 Mike. And then between 2 and 450 caliber machine guns that can be just placed on the railing. These, it's a very capable class of boat. It is a very big boat. Sailors, I know you're about to hate me for calling it a boat, but it goes on water. It is a boat. I like it. Now, to contrast that against the Russian pound for pound, or closest pound to pound, we've got the Kirov class battle cruiser, comrade. Okay, this thing has 20 P-70 Granite anti-ship missiles, 64 3K95 Kinzhal ballistic missiles. The Kinzhals are the ones that, if you remember in 2022, Russians were beating their chest over. It is hypersonic. And then some of our older Patriots that have even been upgraded to our current standards were slapping them out of the sky like flies. Yeah, have fun with that. It has 48 S-300 FM surface-to-air missiles, another 48 S-300 F surface to air missiles. The S-300s have been getting defeated by drones. So, have fun with that. Hell, they haven't even really been able to take down many of the British Shadowhawks or the American Attackums that we've donated to Ukraine. So, beat your chest over the Kinzhal guys, but it's absolute trash. Whereas our stuff that isn't, quote, hypersonic, which, let's get into the hypersonic thing for a minute, because I watch a lot of habitual line crosser. The guy's great. Hypersonic isn't really a thing. When it comes to ballistic missiles, it is, but every ballistic missile just about can be hypersonic. And it goes up into the sky. It flies an arc, a ballistic arc. It launches, it boosts, it reaches its apogee, its top, and then it falls. It uses the terminal velocity to reach that, quote, hypersonic sound or speed barrier. That's really cool. I'm glad you figured that out, buddy. The U.S. has had that for years. Our Trident missile systems have been doing that. Hell, even the Scuds that we defeated in Iraq often were, quote, hypersonic, right? It also has two 305 anti-sub warfare rocket launchers. So non-guided dumb rockets just yeet, which they, track a sub with sonar and get a bearing on it, load it into a computer. The computer tells the launcher where to aim, and then programs the rocket when to blow. It launches, it goes down, finds a sub, kills it. Cool. One twin link 100 AK-130 130 millimeter dual purpose gun. This is 2 barrels on one gun, which it sounds like a really childish one up, to be 100% honest with you. If it fires, consecutively, boom, 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 okay, now you're throwing off your accuracy. If you fire it 2 at once, well, you've got a spread of very little for 230 millimeter rounds. Is it 130 millimeter? I'm going to have to take a look at that. Yeah, it's 130 millimeter. Anyway, it makes zero sense to me. I mean, I think you would be better served, if you want to hear me out, Mr. Russian, breaking that thing apart, making one AK-130 to put on front and one AK-130 to put on back. But hey, I'm just a grunt, Granted, my country has a far better Navy than yours will ever have, but just a grunt. It also has 10 anti-sub or anti-underwater torpedo tubes and one Kashtan point defense gun. It is basically their upgraded Sea Whiz, which is, cool. Good for you. Now we come to what makes America the best Navy in the world. This here is the Gerald R. Ford class aircraft carrier. It carries 2 Mark 29 guided missile launch systems with 8 Sea Sparrow cruise missile interceptors each. That's just loaded. 2 Mark 49 guided missile systems with 21 RIMs, 116 rolling airframe missiles. These are SAMs, take out missiles, airplanes, anything in the sky that you don't like. It runs 3 Phalanx Sea Whiz, 4 Mark 38 25mm machine gun systems, once again, Bushmasters, and then 4 M2 or M3 Browning 50 caliber machine guns. It seems underpowered. All this is defensive. It is to keep things the hell away from it. Its real offensive power comes in the 90 aircraft this thing carries. Once again, we're going back to our swarm tactics. This thing can carry F-18 Super Hornets, the Growlers, which is impossible to find a picture of, so I gave up. That's an electronic warfare aircraft. It can also carry the F-35 Lightnings. It can also carry its own cargo planes, right? The great thing about the U.S. Navy is all of our ships work together as a system. And I know what you're thinking, system's a fun word that we just kind of slap onto everything. Hell, in the Army, they gave me a sleeping bag and called it a sleep system. No, it's a bag that I climb in and don't freeze to death. The system here is actually applicable. It is several key components integrated with each other to be something greater than the whole. Okay, you got computers, you've got satellites, you've got radar, you've got aircraft. I mean, the F-35s can integrate with other aircraft and basically act as an AWACS. AWACS is basically a flying radar dish. The AWACS itself, the Hawkeye that can take off and land off of the Gerald R. Ford here, can integrate with the spy satellite or spy radar. They're running Spy 2, 3, and 6, I believe. The thing about these radars is they are never pointed directly at land because it is dangerous for people there. There have been stories from people working on smaller radars. Just read one actually from an aircraft mechanic working on F-16 that used X-band radar. They overrode the safety switch on it to make sure it is working. And next thing you see, or they saw, was down the runway, several pigeons take off. About 20 minutes later, they found the entire group of pigeons dead. Right? So when we're talking about the Gerald R. Ford and aircraft carriers in general, it is so much more powerful because you actually have space aboard a boat. I mean, granted, not as much space, but it's a boat compared to a plane that has to take off and land. Great thing about these Spy 1 through whatever satellites, they make up the Aegis system. Aegis being the shield of Zeus. Once again, habitual line crosser clued me in on that. Check him out if you guys ever get the chance. He's really great. He's really fun, and he talks a lot of shit. So awesome. This thing can see everything in the sky, see everything on the surface, as well as track subs. Yes, we have aboard surface ships tracking subs with radar, not sonar, radar. There are other things that I might know about the Aegis, but I couldn't find anything to collaborate them, so I'm not even going to talk about them. Just know that this is one of the most sophisticated radar systems on the planet. And now that we've talked about the Aegis goes on the Arleigh Burke, it goes on the Ticonderogas, it goes on like our 2 or 3 frigates, it goes on every aircraft carrier. It networks all these ships together into one giant thinking computer that keeps track of everything at all times. And if it sees something it doesn't like, you just have to tell it to get rid of it. Congress itself has actually mandated that we own or that we have to keep at least 11 supercarriers online at all time. Our supercarriers, especially the Gerald R. Ford class here, run off of 2 nuclear reactors, one to run the ship and one to run all the electronics. Cool thing with all that extra power generation is we use electromagnetics to launch our planes. We don't use old steam catapult systems anymore. We basically railgun them off the boat and say, get in the sky and go do something, which to me just blows my mind. Like, there's so much I've been learning about the Navy recently. Like, I couldn't imagine being in the Navy now, especially being 35, after being basically spoiled by the Army, spoiled in our poverty, basically. That I step aboard a ship and now I'm like in Star Trek USS Enterprise. What is all this sci fi bullshit running around? It is a mind altering, eye opening experience just studying this. But to be fair, now we have to take a look at the Russian aircraft carrier. They only have one. The Admiral Kuznetsov, the thing that burns itself 3 times a year for no reason. Imagine being such a crappy carrier that you keep on having to try to self delete and they won't let you. This thing catches on fire about, at least once a year. It doesn't go anywhere without a towboat or a tugboat. Why? Because it just deadlines so blessed often. It is never operational. I think one time it tried participating in a war game and it couldn't recover an aircraft properly, so that crashed. And if you take a look at the front here, it has a lip that is for it to launch its aircraft. It uses an underpowered steam system. Its aircraft that it does try to launch cannot launch under full payload. They cannot get up to full speed. It is a crapshoot whether they get into the air at all. Sometimes they're just playing how far can I yeet a plane into the ocean. But, it's fine. It's technically an aircraft carrier, though the Russians have been playing with names. Granted, I can't really blame them with that because I like the Japanese. And the Japanese, they play with names like no one's business. So this is technically a aircraft cruiser instead of aircraft carrier. That way it could get through the canal that leads to the Black Sea that Turkey controls, because Turkey has set rules. No aircraft carriers come through here. They go, okay, no, his aircraft cruiser. But it is the only thing they really have to launch fast movers, jet aircraft from sea, and is a piece of trash. Speaking about the pieces of trash that the Soviets or Russians, whatever that they want to call themselves this week, you could call them Putinites, that they run, a couple months ago, they decided to run a small fleet next to Florida. And, it was right as I was getting ready to move down here. A lot of Floridians were, they were acting up. Florida be Florida, right? They had a sub running along with them, and the sub lost part of its protective hull plating. I'm sorry. I don't know how Russia has ever been considered the second greatest naval power of any era when people like France, which don't get me wrong, France is actually pretty base these days. France runs a nuclear aircraft carrier, a super carrier. It is their pride and joy. Their fleet actually operates. Their fleet isn't falling apart. Their fleet isn't rusted to shit. I would go ahead and put the actual naval hierarchy as United States number 1, France number 2, Great Britain number 3. Everyone else can go beat it. And the greatest thing about Russia and its navy is it doesn't have the ports to operate out of. Most of the year, most of their ports are frozen. So they're having to borrow other people's stuff, or they're just locked in for winter because it just freezes. So, Russia, you got my ire this time. And before someone comes in my comments and goes, well, China has the biggest navy in the world. Yes, by numbers. But they also count every shipping vessel, every fishing vessel, every leisure vessel as part of their navy. When it comes to tonnage, the United States owns the first and second largest fleets in the world. The first being the United States Navy, and the second being all of our historical museum ships, most of them being battleships. So, you know, talk all your shit that you want. We can talk about the Chinese anti-ship missiles. That's cool. When it comes to wargaming that, and we usually nerf ourselves during war games, we win in 180 days and only lose 2 carriers. Now, 2 carriers being 5,000 people apiece is a pretty big deal. But when it comes to everything else, I'm not overly worried because China would lose absolutely everything else. That's just me. So, thank you guys very much for tuning in. I know this one was a lot shorter, but there's just so much to cover, and I didn't want to get too lost in the weeds and make this like a 6-hour video. Looking at it right now, I'm probably going to get it in at just over an hour. So thank you guys very much for tuning in. Next week, I'll probably be doing the Air Force. Yeah, any questions, go ahead and drop them into the comments. I'll once I get enough of them, I plan on having a short, Q&A live session. That would be great. You guys have a good one, and I will catch you in the next one.